So now, since you're an automation master, you can just go enjoy a little coffee. FinTech family, how you doing? Second video of a 3-part video series, Python automations in the cloud. The first video, setting up those automations locally, installing your Postgres DB, and getting everything running on a schedule. Next, we're going to be creating the VPS and automating the setup using bash scripting. All right. Trusty Google search, Linode dashboard. It gives you the Linode Cloud Manager. And if you haven't created an account, you might need one. You can go ahead and log in. I know I already said if you hadn't seen the first video, go watch it. On my GitHub, that's where all my scripts are. If you go to the scripts, there's actually a VPS setup guide. And then also inside the scripts, we have this VPS setup.sh. And that's what we're going to be using to do our bash automations once we have our stuff set up. So here's the VPS setup file, but we're going to want to create the VPS first. Here we are. First, we're going to create our Linode. We can select a region that's close to us. All right, great. And then we can select an operating system, Ubuntu 2404 long term. Sounds good to me. Let's just go shared CPU. We can select this nanode for $5 a month. The small one should be fine just for running one script and, a smaller database. Let's give it a name here. I'm going to go ahead and skip through the tags and placement group. Now here is where you create your root password. Don't forget it. So next it wants some SSH keys. I want to figure out if I have one, and then I'll try to add it so that can hopefully simplify things for us a little bit. So I'm going to pop over to a terminal. Okay, great. So it appears that there are no SSH keys. All right, so it appears that there's no SSH keys. And I'll create a password here. Don't forget it. That's it. That ain't for your eyes, honey. Okay, great. So then when we take another look back for our SSH keys here, you can see that here's the keys. So that's awesome. If you're on Mac, right, you could run this, and then you can view your public key by running this, and then you'll copy that and you'll paste it into the key place. All right, CMD was being a real PMIA, so I switched to PowerShell. Okay, solid. So what I'm going to do here is use get content and get the contents of the public key. I'm going to copy it. What you can do is just give your key a name, and then you can paste it in here. So it's going to start with SSHED, blah, blah, blah. And it's going to finish with the email and the quotes. So copy all the way around the outside of the quote, paste it all in there, and then press add key, and then you will have successfully created your SSH key. So now that I've added the SSH key here, I want to click yes. I think that's what I forgot to do. So next I'm going to assign a firewall. I'll run you through it, but this is going to be on the kind of cloud provider level, not on like the server level. I'll explain a little bit more about that later. Here we are, sector server firewall. And then if you don't have a firewall, you can create one, and I'll walk you through the firewall here in a minute. Just open that up and take a quick look. So here are our firewalls. Now we have pretty good restrictions on our firewall. Here we have just a couple of ports and then a few sources, which are the specific IPs that I use. As we're setting up this VPS, you can adjust the rules. I have a set of rules already. Maybe we'll walk through that. We're accepting only specified inbound connections. So here, if you want to add backups, that could be a good idea. Obviously, you should have backups if it's important, like you're working with client data or anything that's important at all. So as you can see, it's provisioning and booting our VPS. So once it's done, we have our IP and our SSH access. We might need that, but I think it makes sense to go through a bit of the setup and what it does. So in the project folder, I have two files, VPS setup.md and VPS setup.sh. That's the bash script. So on the VPS.md file, I have written comments, and then I have a few lines of code that you can put into a command line. So this kind of walks you through how you would do it manually, some of the setup that you would do. But I have this VPS setup.sh, which is a bash script, which it runs and executes you're set up automatically. So I didn't really know the best way to walk you through this. I didn't want to put all the commands in manually because it's an automation and it runs just the whole thing, bang, it just does it. So I think a high level overview of what happens in the script, you can modify your script to be set up the way that you like, and you can add things, and I'll show you what I kind of would add here, make it a little bit more secure. So first things first, it prompts us for the IP address. So we're going to input that when it prompts us, and then it's going to know how to log in, because you'll see it tries to log in here. We have our root username, and then we have a secondary user. So here is the SSH command. It's going to log in as root, and then this is one large command. As you can see from this quote, it runs all the way to the bottom of the script, and you can see the closing quote right here. It runs all of these commands, just bang, bang, bang. It does it. So first we're going to update and upgrade the VPS. One thing I would do here is probably add unattended updates, so that if there's software updates, it will install those and get them running automatically. So I definitely would add that to make this more secure. Next, we're going to set the time zone. So here we are setting it to New York. We're going to set up our Python environment. Here we have a couple of libraries. Here we have the Postgres install. We're going to set that up. Then for our VPS level, we're going to create our non-root user. That's a variable here. And we're going to add the user to the sudo group. Then we're creating a new directory for the SSH keys in the new user. So here we are, we're going to create the directory, give some permissions, and then we're going to copy the root user's authorized keys, which are there from what you inputted in the Linode dashboard. So we're going to copy those keys over to the secondary user. We're going to set ownership and permissions on that new folder that we created for the new user's SSH keys. We're going to install fail to ban, and then we're going to configure it. I'm not going to go into great detail about this jail.config and this jail.local file. We're editing the jail.local file. Now, if you're not familiar with sed commands, it basically finds and changes the text here in these files. And we're just cleaning up and replacing some of the default settings. So we have these default settings, then this line enabled equals true right after this SSHD heading. And then next, we're changing our port for our SSH from whatever number it was to 2222. Then we're going to enable fail to ban, and we're going to start the service. Same thing with Postgres. We're going to start it and check on it. This status is just checking to make sure it works. And I have some more checks at the bottom of the script that you would run to make sure that everything here executed properly. And then, of course, you can look at the files themselves, like this jail.local, and in the SSHD file, this SSHD config file. We'll check that out later. Back to Postgres, we're going to basically create a test DB, create our user here in the DB. We're going to grant all privileges. And then our public schema stuff that we like fumbled through, we're going to just do that. We're going to quit, and that's the end of the file there. So now we're going to take a look at our SSHD config file. It'd be nice if I had the terminal, but we're just going to blaze through this real quick. So we're going to change the port number from 22 to 2222. We're going to uncomment and disable the root login so that no one can log in as root. Be sure not to close your root window, your root terminal, before you've confirmed everything. So when this whole script runs, it leaves the root terminal open so you can go back, look at the SSHD config file, look at the jail.local file, whatever. I'd say most important is leave that open to check your SSHD config. And then in a new terminal, you can log in from your new user and your new port. So we're going to disable password authentication. So instead of passwords, we're going to use the public keys, uncommenting the authorized keys file line, because this is commented by default. We're just going to let them know where to find the authorized keys file. And then we need to add a line, allow users our new username. And then if you have more users, you can just space them out. And then we're going to append that to the SSHD config file. So it's going to pop into the bottom. And then we can test the file to make sure it's good to go, no syntax errors. If it passes, we're going to restart the SSH service. It's very important. In the actual SSHD file, it tells you that you need to run daemon reload and restarts ssh.socket. And then this restart SSH is just here for good measure. It's going to run these three, and then that will be that. And then once that's all done, it's going to leave the root terminal window open so that we can check our SSHD config file, and then we can also test our new user access. And then below here are just some commands to test our sudo access, check the status of failed to ban, check Postgres status, log in as our dev user, and then here in Postgres, create a table, insert, select, update, and then drop the table and make sure everything looks good. If it looks good, then we can just give the reboot command, reboot the VPS, and we're good to go. So as any good engineer knows, you can't run .sh scripts on a PowerShell. So I've opened a Git Bash terminal here, and I'm going to hope to do it in Git Bash. If you haven't installed Git Bash, I made a video of it. It's the Flask web app DB. I think I go through installing Git Bash there, so hopefully you can install it too. So I am navigate to the folder, run this to make it executable. Great, so I'm here in the folder. I will try to give it permissions. We can just run it here. So I'm gonna copy the IP address. I made a typo, so let's try it again. It's gonna ask us, do we want to continue? Enter the root password, and then it's gonna begin updating. So now, since you're an automation master, you can just go enjoy a little coffee. We've got to the place where it's creating this new user, so let's give it a password. I'm gonna just click through all this other information. It's working on fail to ban. Okay, so it got a little hung up, and I think to escape, I pressed Q and then enter, and then that took me out of the text editor that I got stuck in. Looking good. So I think what we can do is quickly take a look around. So if we want to find the SSHD config file, we can see here's our SSHD config file. So if you scroll down a bit, you can see port here. So we changed this. Here's where it says for changes to take effect, run these systemctl commands. So that's what you're seeing here at the bottom. If you go down a bit, we have not permitted root login. Public key authentication is set to yes. Here's where we can find our authorized keys file. Password authentication is uncommented and set to no. And then at the very bottom, we've added allow users and then our second username. We want to check to see if we are able to log into this server from our secondary user before we go ahead and log out of root user. So if you have any problems, you can go in here as root and edit the SSHD config file. So I opened up a new Git Bash terminal. SSH, we're specifying the port number, and then here's our secondary username, and then also our IP. It looks like it's timing out. So you know why that didn't work? Because I spelled the IP wrong. Permission denied. Bruh. All right, check it out. So the SSH did not work. Totally defeats the whole purpose of this video. So I think I didn't include the keys on the last setup, so I'm going to do it again with a new Linode. So now that I've added the SSH key here, I want to click yes. I think that's what I forgot to do. Then we can go through all of that. So I think I didn't include the keys on the last setup, so I'm going to do it again with a new Linode. Like I promised, it leaves you logged in as a root user so that you can test your secondary user login. So now let's just create a new terminal. So here in this command, we're going to try to log in as our new user. We have a SSH command. We're selecting the port. Here's our username and then our IP address, SSH key password. And so, as you can tell, we are logged in as our secondary user and we have access to our server through the SSH command that I showed you before. So that looks pretty good. Let's just take a quick look around, and then if we want to take a look at, we can see, oh look, there's UFW. You can add an additional firewall. We applied the rules in the dashboard here, the Linode dashboard, but you can also use UFW. We can see here's our SSHD config file. So if we take a look at the SSHD config file, I feel pretty good about that there. So we'll exit, I'll close that out, and then I'll just send a reboot over there. Send that out. and then we should be in pretty good shape. So that's how you automate your VPS setup. Just like that, now you know how to set up your VPS, add a firewall, add your SSH keys, no more password logins, add your new users, set up Postgres, you can add the new users there, and then check everything in the SHD file. Once you're done, all that, you're an expert now. In the next part of the video, we're going to be moving all of our scripts and our database from local, from the first video, into the VPS that we just created through the new user and our newly secured VPS. Obviously, there's a couple more steps I would take to improve this, but it's good enough for now. You probably want to add the unattended upgrades, and then also the UFW, and then there's some other stuff. I'll leave some other links that are good VPS resources for you in the description. Let's go, fam.